Hey everybody, welcome back. Hiking Stick again. And this is the third video in our Visual Basic for Applications, or VBA Macros segment. And in this video we're just going to go over some very simple tips on how to get started writing your first macro from scratch. So we are beyond recording macros at this point, and we're going to jump right in and start writing our own macros. The very first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and click on the top half of that macros button, and we're going to go into the Visual Basic interface by clicking on this and then edit. Go ahead and put that in there so everybody can see. And we're not even going to use this this macro here. We're going to go ahead and create a new module, nice blank module. So you're going to right click on your modules in your project manager, go to insert, and then module. And we're going to give this a useful name. We're going to call this say we're going to give it a useful name. We're going to call it macro 2, since this is our second macro. And I like to create a new module for each macro. It's a personal preference, really. You can actually put multiple macros in one file, but it helps me keep everything clean and organized, so that's the way I do it. To start typing your macro, you're always going to start it with the word sub and then macro 2, and then you're just going to push enter, and that's going to auto-populate that in sub there. And then the things that I like to put at the top are things like the date that I created the macro. So we'll go ahead and put in today's date there. And I like to put in who wrote the macro. I know at my job it's possible that I may move around to another team and somebody else might have to look at this later. And there, now you guys know my real name. I thought twice about that, but now you know. And then the first couple of lines that I always put into my macro is I always want to start by making sure that I'm on the sheet that I want the macro to perform the actions on. So to select the sheet, we're going to type in the word sheets and then the name of our sheet. So in this case, it's just going to be sheet 1 because we have not renamed our sheet yet, and select. So that will actually take the Excel file that we're looking at, and it will move to the sheet called sheet 1. Now if there's no sheet called sheet 1, that will throw an error. So you want to make sure that whatever you put in here is an actual sheet that exists. And then the very next thing we're going to do is say range, and this is where you can put the actual cell location that you want it to select. Range A1 select. So what we've written here is a very, very simple macro that will select sheet 1 and then select cell A1, which is the uppermost left cell in the spreadsheet. So that's a great starting point, and it's a good jumping off point for everything else. If you're doing any kind of searching through cells or formatting cells, cell A1 makes it easy because you're starting in the first cell. It's easy to count out how many rows or columns you need to work with. So we'll go ahead and run this. Go ahead and save. And to run it, you have a couple of options. You can either push the little play button here, or you can push F5. And then there's another option, which I believe is your debug option. You can step into it with F8, which is what I like to use when I first have written a macro and I want to make sure that everything's working correctly and that there's no errors. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this down so that we can see both. So as you can see, we've got I've got cell C3 selected here. So I'm going to come down to my macro. I'm going to press F8 on my keyboard to step into it, and you can't actually see what's going on here. Alright, so my function keys aren't working, so I'm just going to click on debug and then step into. If you're not running this on a laptop that has a funky key setup on it, you can actually hit F8 on your keyboard, which is much easier. So we're going to hit step into. You can see that it turns yellow, which is where it's at right now. So let's go ahead and hit it again, and it's going to jump to the next line, which is sheet1.select. So once we run that, so one more time, step into, it actually selected the first sheet. So had we been on a different sheet, it would have selected that sheet. And you can see we've still got cell C3 selected, and then we step into one more time, and it jumps to A1. You can see that our cell selection jumps to A1, and at the bottom here it highlights in yellow end sub, so the next time we do the step into, it's actually going to step out of the macro since that was the end of it. So as you can see, we've got a very simple macro here, selects our first sheet and then selects the upper leftmost cell in that sheet. So in the next one, in the next video, we'll do some other formatting type things, and we'll expand more upon this macro here. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel.